Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the UCM podcast. It's Dr. Bill Davis here. Very excited to be with you again. Doctors and students, welcome back. And today I have a very special guest, longtime friend of mine. I think we've known each other probably about 15 years or so, Dr. Kerry Johnson from Minnesota. Very excited to have him back on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Kerry Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Bill. Thanks for the invitation. Great to see you again.
Absolutely. So love to have you on the podcast. I mean, you have obviously a ton of experience, been in practice. I know well over 3 decades now, right? And so tell us a little bit about yourself. Anybody out there that doesn't know you, tell us, kind of a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I was saved from low back surgery about halfway through chiropractic college at Life, and it was a specific upper cervical adjustment that kind of rocked my world, and so I was compelled to practice it. But my wife was 4 months pregnant when I graduated, so we moved back up to Minnesota because she wanted to be by her mom, and I was the only doctor that practiced NUCA in Minnesota for my first 10 years in practice, and I was actually not very good at it, and I didn't have really any coaching. I had 2 little kids then, within my first 2 years, and couldn't afford to go to the conferences. And I'm sorry, excuse me. I just got done with a pretty nasty bronchitis that I picked up on a cruise.
No problem.
And so we slow but surely we figured it out and developed a successful practice. And so I think I opened in fall of '86, and by 1994 I had peaked out at over 300 visits a week in my practice, which was busy for a NUCA practice. And then slowly kind of slowed it down after that because I wanted to focus on quality, on not quantity. But it was about 1997 that the thought occurred to me that there's more people that need help than what I can give. And the thought also occurred to me that there needs to be more people doing NUCA if there's going to be more people that are going to get help. And right. Really understanding the enormity of this problem at the cranial cervical junction on, the human condition, I really at that point was kind of compelled to say, okay, how can we get more doctors doing this work?
Right. Yeah. And that kind of started a journey for you, right? Starting to try to figure out how to do associates well. As you said, we were talking before we started, right? You did every way that didn't work for a while, right?
Yeah. So about that time, I had a doctor interested in learning this work, and we talked about it, and I said, sure, well, come on in. And so I had my first associate, and we did a 2-year contract, and year 1 was great, and year 2 sucked, and then he left, not on very good terms.
Right.
And then it was about 6 times of that where I just would repeat, bring in another doctor. And I remember it was also about that time I had spoken to somebody. I said, if there were 100 NUCA doctors in Minnesota, we could change healthcare. And the funny thing is that I think that was a deposit from above, because that little thing never left me. And so for years and years, as I'm doing associates, I'm like, well, this 100 NUCA doctors, I don't know how this is going to happen through me.
Right.
But I don't know if I tolerate having 100 great first years and really bad second years, and then start over again and then repeat.
Right.
And so that's when I just realized that, okay, there's something that I'm missing.
So you started to try to figure out what that was, right? What was missing? What was the key to getting this right with associates? Because obviously, you don't do what you're doing now, which is having multiple practices, which is what we're going to get to soon. But you don't get to multiple practices without multiple doctors, right?
Yeah.
You can't be one doctor and have 3, 4, 5 practices, right? So
Right.
talk about, what were some of those things that you learned when you finally started getting some traction when it comes to building an associate program? What were some of those key things you learned?
Well, so the first thing that I want to say is that I was really at a point of where I was just about done with associates.
Yeah.
And again, because this little thing was gnawing inside of me, that somehow I felt that I was going to be used or be a part of this 100 NUCA doctors in Minnesota. And I was trying to figure out what that looked like. And at the time, I got an invitation to teach at the college, the NUCA method as an elective. And
Right.
so I'm like, okay, I'm a believer. So I'm like, okay, Lord, maybe this is what you're asking of me, is to go teach. And that's how this will happen. And so for several years, this 100 NUCA doctor thing kept kind of stirring in me.
Yeah.
And so there was a weekend or a week that we were up at the lake at the cabin. And when we're on vacation, my wife likes to sleep late, but I like to get up early. So I'm up on the deck overlooking this gorgeous lake. And every morning I'm up at 5 o'clock and set my coffee down on my armrest of my Adirondack chair. And I'm sipping coffee, and I had 5 questions that I was really wanting answers for. And in my morning quiet time, Lord, show me answers to these 5 things. And one of them was, what's up with the 100 NUCA doctors, right? Because I was like miserable failure at doing associates. So I asked him every morning. I asked him these questions. I was like, nothing. The last morning, Saturday morning, we were packing up to go home that day. I set my coffee down. I sit my butt down in the chair, and all of a sudden I felt this voice say, ask me your questions. And it was like a 1-hour writing fest. As fast as I could write, I was getting these downloads, right? I don't know if you believe God speaks to you.
Absolutely.
But that morning, I heard this voice said, now you're ready to build a company of 100 kingdom-minded, like-minded NUCA doctors. And I'm like, what? And, I wrote it down, and I was like,
yeah.
And then I started laughing.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, scratch that one off. Until 2 days later, Monday, I get this Facebook message from a pastor I'd gone on vacation with the previous February. And he gives me a Facebook message, and he says, oh, I had a word for you back in February. And basically, you're going to build a company of like-minded and kingdom-minded NUCA doctors.
Wow.
Use the same words. So I'm like, okay, I didn't see that coming. I did not have that ambition, but I really felt like it was a mandate. And so 2 months later, I'm in Michael Lenars' associate boot camp and realized that everything I was doing was wrong. I realized that I had not spent the time that I needed, that my associates needed. I expected them to learn by osmosis. I had no systems. So I really, basically, I didn't know how to do the associate, how to manage another doctor in the practice.
Right.
And so I learned it quite a bit then. And then, things were a little bit better with our associates. And then my son came in and he joined our practice doing kind of the business. I had a whole business entrepreneurship degree in a prestigious business school. And he was working in corporate America, moving up the ladder at Target. And he felt like he was supposed to quit all that and come and work with us. And I would say one of the things that became the pivot, I was on vacation in Europe, and we were both decided to read the book Good to Great.
Yeah.
And of course, the book's like 15 years old.
Sure.
And they ask you to write down your hedgehog, which is, what's the one thing you can do better than anybody else in the world?
Right.
Your company. And the previous 2 times I'd read it, I was like, we're going to have the best NUCA doctors helping the most people. Like it had to do with like being good at NUCA and helping people. On this occasion, I'm right on a bus right in the middle of Austria. And it was as clear as a bell. You know what? we have to have flourishing doctors.
Hmm.
What we have to do in our practice, what our hedgehog needs to be, is that our doctors flourish. Because if doctors flourish in our practice, why would they want to go anywhere else?
Right.
And I got home, and my son had read the book too, and that was the exact same thing he got.
Wow.
For a hedgehog. So that was I think that was probably the one most pivotal thing, is that, and flourishing can't be what my definition of it is.
Right.
It has to be what that doctor's definition of flourishing is. And what we found is different for every doctor.
That's right. Exactly. So then it becomes, starting to hire doctors, right? That's when you started bringing doctors into the main clinic, at least, and started to work with them, right? And as you were doing that, that's when you started figuring out what they wanted.
I would also say that the other key element in the success of our practice is my son gave me the book Rocket Fuel.
Yep.
Which talked about that every successful company needs a visionary and a integrator.
Right. Yep.
And I test out like top 3% of visionary, and my son's 100% integrator. And then, of course, the next book he handed me was the book Traction. And of course, I know you're familiar with that.
I am.
And so we really followed the Traction model. And so we established like who we are, our core values, right?
Yep.
And so it became easy to hire when we communicated our core values, like this is who we are. And so making that very clear up front. And then I think the other thing, that in order for doctors to flourish, they needed enough of my time. And Dr. Lenars taught me that principle too. So spending time with the doctors, communicating with the doctors, and then we established our compensation plan. They don't make a lot of money to start with, but as they get more and more successful in their practice, and they hit our models of practice, they can make as much in a group practice as they would make on their own. My goal was to set it up that a doctor could make as much in our practice as they could if they were on their own, and even when I was on my own. So we meet very regularly with our doctors. So we just hired our 7th associate. So there's 8 of us total. And then, of course, when there was 5 of us, we were kind of blowing up at the seams here, trying to all work in one space.
Yeah.
And so we found what we found the best way for us to have space in Minnesota is the office condo route. And so we got it's an SBA loan, like I don't remember if it was 507 or something like that, which helps you to buy the building and remodel it, put all the equipment in it. And so we launched our 2nd location about 3 years ago and sent one of our doctors over there. And then soon we trained up another doctor. And so we had 2 doctors over there. And because of my proximity to the school, and then the fact that I've taught the NUCA elective for 13 years, it's been a real gift for us to recruit.
Sure.
And then we've had a base of, because my practice is 38 years old, like on the northeast side of the Twin Cities, we had probably close to 300 patients, where it's a closer drive for them to go to a practice in White Bear than down here. And so a year ago we found another town office and launched a practice there.
Nice.
And so now we have a place for all of those patients to go that's much closer.
Very cool.
So
8 total doctors now in the system. And so talk about, when you first were getting the 2nd location started, and now this new one in White Bear, how much of your time were you spending at those locations in order to get them going?
I didn't spend any time at them. So yeah, so basically what we did was like the first doctor that we launched, he lives over there.
Mm-hmm.
He was way closer to that clinic than our clinic, so he was commuting 25 minutes each way. And so because he lives over there, he has relationships over there already, and he has family over there, and he has friends over there. And then because he had families and friends, he was in our practice here for like, I don't know, 4 years. And a lot of the patients that he was seeing were over in that way, because those were the people he networked with to build his practice.
Right.
And so he was able to go over there and be successful right out of the gate, because of the demographics of his own practice. And then the fact that we had a whole bunch of other patients in our clinic, and we encouraged our patients, hey, go over there, it's close. If you don't like it, you can always come back. And so yeah, he was pretty busy right out of the gate in that practice.
Gotcha. So you didn't actually see patients at that location at all, or you haven't seen
No.
patients at those locations at all. Just you've stayed in your main clinic, and the associates have seen all the patients at the other locations since day one.
Well, 3 years ago, I was seeing patients 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And then trying to recruit a doctor and train, and it was just too much for me. So I actually stopped seeing patients on Friday and Monday. And so then I was 3 days a week, and 2 days a week I was up at the college practicing, because we practice at the Sweary Clinic. We have a contract with them. And then I was still only Wednesdays here in our main clinic in Apple Valley. And so just when I got back from my vacation, I just transitioned. I turned over the college practice to one of our newer associates, and I actually now I'm seeing patients only 2 days a week, but at the Savage Clinic, because my house is 5 minutes from that clinic.
Got you. So you're not seeing patients at the main clinic anymore, the original clinic.
No.
Gotcha.
No. So there's 3 other doctors here that are seeing patients here.
Very cool.
Yeah. So now I have even more time to spend with our newer doctors. And I think that, I've always been pretty good at like the boot camp, getting them from 0 to 30 miles an hour, right? Like,
yeah.
Here's all your basics, and now you're ready to see patients, and that's usually 90 to 120 days. We actually call it our boot camp, right?
Yeah.
And then they would start seeing patients. And what I realized, the other mistake that I made with associates is you assume that you teach them something, okay, they got that, you can move on from that. But it's just not the way NUCA works, any upper cervical. And every time I go to a conference, I'm reminded of it, that I need to be reminded of these things, to get better at. And so the other thing that I've done too is now when I take an associate to get through their boot camp, and I actually supervise 10 patients that they see, but I'm with them. But then after that, now what we're doing in the first year is I will actually go over every case with them, 90 more cases, where I go over their analysis, both the pre and the post imaging, and I go over their vector selection with them. They choose it, but then we talk about it. Right. I go over their reasoning of the post image. And so that's why I actually needed more time off from patients, so that I could spend more time, because we just brought 3 new doctors on in the last 6 months. So I don't want to say it's herding cats, but it requires more time to be able to go to spend the time that they need. So my goal also isn't that we just have associates, but that we have board certified associates, that we get doctors highly skilled at this work, much sooner than was happening before in our practice.
That's great. So you talked about, that you're not physically at all 3 locations or anything like that. So what are some of the ways that you've you've been able to, and make sure that the culture is consistent from one location to the next. And you talked about the
Yep.
importance of your core values and that type of thing. So
Yep.
making sure that the core values are integrated into all three of the different locations.
Yes. So we actually, in our clinic, we meet as a whole team every Monday morning.
Gotcha.
So all the clinics will get together and we all meet together on Monday mornings. And so and each clinic actually has their own meeting. So we designate a clinic director for each clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the clinic directors are obviously they're 100% bought in on our core values. Plus they have leadership abilities. And so, Dr. Chris is the clinic director at our Savage Clinic. So I actually work for him now. It's kind of weird. I just started seeing patients there, but he's the boss. So we'll see how that works. And then we have a clinic director here in Apple Valley, and she's actually directing both the Apple Valley and the White Bear Clinic. So they're the ones that go over all the metrics. And I think that's another thing that's really key for any practice is that you understand where you're at.
Yeah.
Right. How many new patients are you seeing? And what's your conversion rate on your, people enrolling in a care plan? And what's your retention? Like all your KPIs in a practice. And this is one of the big things that you help people with is understanding where your practice is at so you can analyze it and pay attention to it. I've said for a very long time that a successful practice is paying attention to 500 little things. And unfortunately, that's the way it is.
That is. Yeah. That's what you sign up for, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you mentioned, the importance of, in your practice as identifying yourself as a visionary and Matt as the integrator, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk more about that role, the two roles that you have and how you work together at making sure that, everything keeps running the way you're envisioning it to be?
Well, again, we had to make the decision, is this a vision or isn't it? Like, is this the vision of the company or isn't it? And what's very interesting is if you make a decision on the vision and direction of your company, whether you feel like it was divinely inspired or not, I believe mine was divinely inspired. We make decisions based upon the fact that we're going to be a 100 NUCA doctor company. Well, not just, it still sounds crazy if I mention it, right?
Yeah.
But, here we are 8 years later after this first came to me, and we have 8 of us now.
Yeah.
And we would not have had 8 of us now had we not made decisions. Like, I probably still would only be in one clinic. Had we not made decisions to move towards this vision. And this is the beautiful thing about traction is, here's your crazy, big, hairy, audacious goal, your BHAG,
right,
one that's way out there. But then, okay, what's your 3-year plan to get towards that? And then what's your 1-year plan to get to your 3-year plan? And then, what are you going to do pretty much every week to get to your 1-year plan?
Yep.
And so I also, having my son thinking through this outside of the dumb chiropractor's box, that's me, has been so helpful. And so that it's been, and then also being able to take the 30,000 foot view and bring it on down in the 10,000 foot land, and then deciding which plane you're going to land and when you're going to do it. It's been very helpful. And I think also I somewhere along the line learned the power of agreement and where 2 or more agree. And I also learned that doing this as a team is so much more fun than doing it by myself, even on the leadership side. In fact, our doctors that go and launch a new office for us, they miss the whole team environment when they go out and start a practice. So yeah, I think the power of working together as a team allows us to do more than we can do on our own.
For sure. Yeah.
You know, you put a team of horses together and they're going to pull infinitely more or exponentially more than each one would on their own.
That's right. Yep. So you got the eight doctors now in the system, and how many CAs do you have at each location?
Right now, we still only have one. Well, we have two that rotate at the Savage Clinic. We have one person in our practice that is kind of dedicated towards the corporate side. Well, two people. One manages all of our insurance, and we're a cash practice, but we still have Medicare, and because we can't opt out of that, even though we're non-participating providers, we do take auto cases. So one person handles all of our insurance stuff, all of our customer service stuff, and then Felicia handles all of our project management and our HR, stuff with our company, and some of our policies and our manual. Like we just rewrote our whole boot camp manual, training manual, and she was very integral working with me in that one. So we have two people that are dedicated now just on the corporate side, that handle stuff for the whole clinic wide. And then I think we have one person up at White Bear, and then we have, I think, 4 other people that work here at the Apple Valley Clinic that are, front desk and seeing patients and working with patients. So,
gotcha. You mentioned earlier, that you really you had a breakthrough when you realized that the key to making this all work and getting to the 100 doctors is having flourishing doctors, right?
correct.
And you said that doesn't mean the same to every doctor that you bring in. So can you talk through more about that? Like what are some of the answers that you've gotten to that question when you've asked doctors, what does it look like to you to be flourishing? Just so that other doctors that are out there listening that may be bringing on associates or be thinking about it, what are some of the answers that you've had, and how have you helped facilitate that with these associates?
Well, I think that, first and foremost, they have to get to a place of where they're paying their bills, and so I'll tell you, the first year is even difficult for associates because we don't pay a large base, but we also want to give them the tools and teach them how to be a go-getter and teach them how to recruit patients. And so, I mean, it's a difficult first year, but I would say it's kind of like what I've said about patients. Patients don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think first and foremost, people flourish when they're valued. And that's that's probably the number one thing that I always try to express and want our doctors to know is how much I care about them and how much I care about their success and their well-being. And so someone said a long time ago, you spell love Time. And that's what I actually went back and called all of the early associates that I had in my practice. And I asked them, where did I go wrong? What were some of my errors? Like where were some places that I need to seek forgiveness, And the common thing that I heard was I wasn't giving them enough time of my time. And so that's probably an really important thing for an associate to flourish, is that you're not just expecting them to learn by osmosis.
Right.
Which is what I was thinking. Here, watch me and you'll figure out how to do it. patience. So letting them know you value them, being patient with them, teaching them how to be successful. I have some doctors that their number one focus is to get to a certain visit count, right? Because that's flourishing for them.
Right.
I have other doctors in my practice that want to get board certified. Okay. And that's flourishing for them. And we're actually working on that right now, how we can incorporate into the Johnson Spinal Care way a path for certification that's more proactive.
Right.
So, yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah. And it's being able to key in on that and help, because that goes into keeping them motivated, right? If you can understand what flourishing looks like to them, they can be, you can inspire them, encourage them, motivate them, hold them accountable, and all those things. If you've got a clear picture of what that is to them.
And I also think that you know this, and you've helped a whole lot of people with it. In fact, I think you've given us help with it before, is that successful clinic really is about systems.
Yep.
I mean, it really is. Like, learning how to manage a patient with a system is so important, right? Knowing how to manage your collections is a system. Knowing how to train doctors, if you can do it systematically, it's easier for everybody.
Yeah, 100%. That's right. And it's a key to like you were saying, to an individual practice. If you have one practice, you need to develop systems. If you want multiple practices, it's even more important, right?
Yes.
You're never going to be able to replicate something that's not systematized, right?
Right. Exactly. And then I think probably the last thing is, we look for people that are givers, because that's the one thing you can't train. My heart is I'm a giver, right? I don't want to take. I want to give people more in value than what I take in payment. And then we do that with patients, but I also want to do that with our staff. I want to do that with our doctors. It's like, I want to give, and so we look for that. It's not exactly part of our core values, but it's kind of written into our core values, is that we look for people that are givers and not takers. I think it's so important in any organization.
I love that.
The trust, and it comes down, that's where you can trust somebody, if you know that you're working with a giver, not a taker.
That's
and
right.
Trust is very important also in associate practice.
100%. Yeah. So this has been a great conversation, Kerry. I just appreciate it so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up for today?
No, that was probably my wrap up.
That's good. Well, I would say, if you're interested in learning more about Johnson Spinal Care and what, because you're going to need more doctors, right? You're going to get to 100. You got 92 more to go.
We're always hiring. We're looking for good docs. And,
that's right.
And we also have fun too.
Yeah.
So that's also awesome. Important. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And so I would say, if you want to be part of this vision that God has given Dr. Kerry Johnson, I have no doubt about that, hopefully you're going to get that 100 pretty, before too long. So,
hopefully I'll get to see it.
Yeah, hopefully I will too. We'll see.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. So very cool. But yeah, you can go to johnsonspinalcare.com, right? And learn more about the clinic and Dr. Kerry Johnson and all the great stuff that he's been doing in Minnesota and will continue to do. So thank you again so much, Kerry, for joining us on the podcast today. We really appreciate you.
Yes.
And as always, we always say, go team upper cervical.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Bill. God bless you.